and excited for the first time to have on my show Representative Stacey Plaskett, a Democrat representing U.S. Virgin Islands at large, serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the Budget Committee, and the House Committee on Agriculture. Representative Plaskett, nice to meet you in person. Thanks for being here. I've been an admirer of your work. You're a House manager. You did a great job there. I saw you speaking about Project 2025 and other issues. So thanks so much for making time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, putting the issues out there.
That we are all in this together. We got 104 days to save this nation, and we all have to lock hands and work hard. So I want to get your reaction, first of all, to President Biden's speech. I mentioned right before we came on air live here that listeners have been sharing, and it was emotional about his legacy and how he'll be remembered. So I just love to get your reaction.
Oh my gosh. It was very emotional for me. I was a ride or die Joe Biden person. And Sunday came as a surprise. I was texting with other members, some of whom were way closer to him than me and were unaware of this. And then him turning around and then passing his support to Kamala Harris was just the ultimate statesman to me. And listen, everybody's got their personal Joe Biden story. Joe Biden comes to the Virgin Islands every Christmas. He spends every Christmas into New Year's on the island where I live, St. Croix. And I can recall he was going to be leaving, and his team said, do you want to spend a little time with him? And I was like, sure, definitely. My daughter and I were supposed to be leaving the day before for her to get back to school. And so we were on the tarmac with him, and he was like, Talia, tell me about school. You know, he loves children. So he's asking her about school and her schoolwork and her teachers. And then he's like, somebody give me a piece of paper because Talia's didn't go to school yesterday. I need to write you a note. And I need to let the teachers know not to give you a hard time, that you really were with the president. Just a gracious man, just a sweet man. And
that's funny.
The speech was, to me, such a contrast with the other candidate and the other party, with someone who is not, has determined that I want this and I believe I can do it, but this is so divisive and it's tearing everybody apart. And let me pass the baton to the next person and give my support to someone who I believe can do the job, to bring my party together, because we have a job that's greater than us as individuals. We have a country and a republic if you can keep it, as Benjamin Franklin said, and the president quoted.
Yep. I mean, I was playing some of President Biden's speech from last night, and some of those lines stood out, and where he said, nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition, which is something you'll never hear from the other guy.
Right.
Never. Right. This is a guy who attempted a coup because he wanted to stay in power, even though he lost. He doesn't give it the will of the people. And so I want to get your reaction. The next step is President Biden says on Sunday he's not going to run, endorses Vice President Harris. What has happened since then? It feels like a lifetime in that the endorsements rolling in, the money raising, the excitement. I just had the Democratic chair from Wisconsin on yesterday, Ben Wickler, who was at the event with Vice President Harris. He said it was like a rock concert. He said, we haven't had an event that big since 2012 for Democrats, which was Obama running for re-election. That big, 3,500 people packed in an auditorium. So what's your reaction to the overwhelming support, excitement, hope, energy by Vice President Harris's candidacy?
I was on that Sunday night call with the over 40,000 Black women that were there. I had just flown back to DC and was on the call. My husband was in the Virgin Islands with our daughter, our teenage daughter, and was like, hey, log on to the call so I can eavesdrop on what's happening with the women, because where the women are going, we're going. That was like church, these women there. That was a rally in itself. Then Black men saying, we're not going to be outdone. We're going to have ours, raising the same amount of money, over 30,000 of them. The AAPI, Native Hawaiian group, having theirs, over 30,000 people on there. It's just tremendous. I have a group of interns for the summer, which I love. My Gen Zers are losing their mind. They're so excited about this race. And I have to tell you, Dean, One thing that's difficult to stop is momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy and the momentum are there, that I think that it's a short enough period of time, but a long enough for this to really take us over the top.
And that's what we're all hoping. I'm chatting with Representative Stacey Plaskett. So in addition to member of Congress, you're on the Rules Committee for the Democratic National Committee.
Sure.
And they announced the rules that dealing with the nomination. So can you share what they announced, and that people, if they want to run, folks, you got 2 days, you got a couple of days, you could run. It is open. So in all seriousness, what can you share, please?
So, people were talking about, oh, we don't want this to be a coronation. This should be we should have a primary. Well, in essence, you are. Because delegates, while they may be pledged to an individual, they were pledged to Biden-Harris. Harris is still on the ticket, but they are free to pledge themselves to any other candidates who announce that they are, in fact, going to be want to be a candidate. And the rule that was promulgated was that if you, Dean, want to be the Democratic nominee, you have to get 300 delegates, just 300 of the almost 4,000 delegates, to say we want Dean. And it has to be no more than 50 from one state. So you could get 30 from one state, 10 from another, 20 from another. So long as it's 300 or more, you can be on that, the roster of individuals that delegates can choose. At this point, I don't know if there's anybody else who's stepped up. Dean Phillip has delegates from running in the primary. We don't know if he's released them as yet. But this is the time period between now and July 30th where individuals can be there. And that's, in essence, a mechanism that will allow it to be open to other individuals. And once that then closes, then delegates have the opportunity to vote for who they want to be the nominee. We're doing this roll call vote because the Republican Party is, of course, saying that we are going to sue. There are already 24 lawsuits against the DNC on a variety of issues. And so we know that we need to meet this August 7th deadline to be on the ballot in Ohio. It's not just about the presidential candidate. We need to have that presidential candidate in Ohio for Sherrod Brown, who's also on that ticket, to ensure that we have people and momentum and people coming on to that. Montana, California also have certifications that need to be put in while we are in the convention. So this is why we're going to have the virtual roll call like we did in the last election, and then move on. The other argument I've heard people make is that, well, we don't know who her ticket is. We don't know who the person is that she's going to bring on. In a normal primary, when you do not have an incumbent, that individual who's running in a primary does not have a running mate. Trump did not have a running mate. Biden did, the first time he ran, did not have a running mate when we got to the convention. Obama did not have Biden when he ran in the primary. He picked Biden through the primary process and meeting him and getting to know him. And this is what Vice President Harris is going to be doing, and we'll announce that individual when we get to before we get to the convention.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm only 300 delegates short right now from becoming a candidate. But if I can get the 300, then I will endorse Vice President Harris. I would just use it to go on and plug my show.
You're going to be like,
folks, I get 300 delegates. I have the Dean Obeidallah show and SiriusXM.
Release my delegates
to Vice President in exchange for being Secretary of State. And you're like, what? So, no, okay, that was Assistant Secretary for Middle East Affairs, I think, because I'm half Arab. So I think I have credibility on that. I'm just going to float out this. So I wanted to talk about the other guy for a second here in Trump. You were an impeachment manager in the January 6th Senate trial. You know inside and out what he did. We learned even more from the January 6th committee. We are almost 4 years from that guy's attempt. A coup. It was a coup. I just wrote about it for MSNBC yesterday. It came out. Can you believe 4 years later, he's not held accountable for what he did by trying to overturn the election, and while not charged for January 6th, as your January 6th committee put, the central cause of the January 6th attack was one person, Donald J. Trump. We all know that. And you used to be a prosecutor yourself. I mean, doesn't it undermine the deterrence value when it's 3 years and a half and that person who did that is still not held accountable?
Well, you know that Jack Smith has several cases that are now in the works on appeal, trying to reevaluate them for the prosecution of the criminal who is, in fact, Donald Trump. One of
Mhm.
which is the classified documents case, which was dismissed by Judge Cannon in Florida. That, of course, he's gotten leave to be able to appeal that. He's doing that. So many of her decisions have been, in fact, reversed by the courts beyond her, and we'll see what happens in there. The case that's in Washington, D.C., that's regarding the riot itself, regarding the attempted coup, which is before the judge, that is related to the immunity decision by the Supreme Court. It's been sent back down to the lower court. And so the trial judge in that case has to review and see what she can and cannot fits within the parameters of what the Supreme Court does. And then, of course, we have the state courts, the straight trials, which are still on track, will be after the election. And so I believe that in the end, we're going to continue to move forward. Those prosecutors, attorneys, and judges will move forward, and we'll see what happens. But as you can recall, President Biden did talk about Supreme Court reform in his speech last night. And it's become more and more evident that we have a court that is a runaway court that is trying to do the what their own party would like them to do. I've tried to explain it to people in discussions that after the what led to one of the things that led to the Civil War was a Supreme Court that was out of control, issued pronouncements like Dred Scott, which took away powers from the Congress, which gave powers to the states and to themselves to try and push a narrative and try to push a position on the Confederacy, which led many in the North to say, this has gone beyond the pale and we've got to do something, and led to war. Let's hope that after this Congress is ended, this do-nothing 118th Congress led by Speaker Michael Johnson, that we have a new Congress that will seriously take up Supreme Court reform, and we can get something on the books that will cause the American people to have confidence in the Supreme Court again. Me, as a lawyer, as someone who actually liked law school and liked reading legal cases, this is heartbreaking to see what's happened to our Supreme Court.
I agree. When I went to law school, it was considered a real court above board, not a political operation.
Yeah.
Now, Quinnipiac poll shows 2/3 of our fellow Americans think it's just a partisan institution, and it has become that now. And that undermines one of the checks and balances of our Constitution. It makes it more likely we could lose a republic if Trump were to win and they get the House and the Senate. They have the Supreme Court, and it's very dangerous. So, the last couple of things, you gave an impassioned talk in the House about Project 2025. We've been covering it as much as possible. We're going to every other week try to have like one segment and go to deep dive on it. What can you? There's so much to it, but what can you share overall that concerns you about that our fellow Americans should know and be aware of?
Well, I think one of the things that Americans need to be aware of is first that Trump, who is trying to distance himself from this is his plan.
Yep.
This is his plan. He tries to say he has no idea about Project 2025, which is a 900-page document that is a presidential transition plan for January 21st to be done. The authors of it had major roles in the Trump administration, whether they were chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management, White House Assistant Special Counsel, FCC Commissioner, the HUD Secretary, the Chief of Staff of EPA, Assistant Secretary of Education, Deputy Assistant to the President, Acting Assistant Secretary of State. Come on. These are people who are in contact with the president and, in fact, believe that Project 2025 should be the mandate for a Trump next term. The things that are most worrisome to me are the things that are doing, we talk about it at a high level. He wants to dismantle education, but then you need to talk to people about how is this going to affect your life? They're going to dismantle school lunch programs.
Mhm.
after school programs. There is going to be a desire to only have Christian education taught in public schools. I thought we had a separation of church and state in the United States. There's going to be so many things that I think are going to affect Americans' lives. Putting Medicare on the path to privatization, repealing President Biden's Medicare drug price negotiation program, which drove down insulin to $35 for seniors. Reinstitution of the Muslim ban. I know that many people are concerned with President Biden and whether or not he's moving fast enough for a ceasefire and for discussions about the people in Gaza, the atrocious things that are happening in Pakistan. But I want to remind them what Trump has in store for them, which is a ban on Muslims, deportation of individuals that are here, some of whom are married to Americans. It is egregious, the things that are in there. Repeal of greenhouse gas emissions projects that we're doing. It's all across the board that this is going to
Yep.
be affecting us. You know, now they want to call Kamala Harris the DEI hire. Well, there will be no diversity, equity, and inclusion in the United States. Repealing, making a national ban on abortion, stating that a family is only a family if it's a husband and wife with children. What? Is this America? They're taking us to a place that is very scary.
They want to take us back. And as Vice President Harris talked at a rally on Wednesday, we're not going back. And the crowd organically chanted, not going back. You know, we're not going back. And Trump,
Mhm.
at their events, are chanting, send them back, which is
Yep.
the whole idea,
Mhm.
just returning America to a different time. And that's it. The
Dean,
last two things.
can I ask
Sorry.
you a question?
Sure.
In a Harris whomever administration, what are some of the things that you think are going to be important for her to do in the first 100 days?
I think it depends if you have control of the House and the Senate, but aspirationally, because to me, the greatest power of a president is not just signing legislation. That takes a
Right.
lot of luck of having a House or Senate. It's setting a tone. And it's
Yeah.
setting a tone about bringing a Supreme Court back into the world of legality and getting politics out of it. It's the idea of, she's already talked about it, but I think there were things in Build Back Better that polled so well that were blocked. Paid family leave for the whole nation, funded pre-K for children, having it nationally funded. This is so vital. Expanding Medicare so our seniors don't have to worry about, can they afford vision and hearing aids and dental. I mean, the idea of the dignity of our seniors, to make them grovel for health care and dental care, is beyond me. And so those kind of things, I think, are great policy. They also poll well. I will say Vice President Harris just came out of the meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and had amazing words about talking about Gaza, saying the images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety. We cannot look away from the face of these tragedies. Is such great, powerful words.
Well, I was not at his
I'm
speech.
I'm sorry.
I was not there at his speech. I
No,
was
no.
one of those
Yesterday.
members
No, no.
that I was one of those members that I'm not going to that. I find it offensive that he comes to Washington during the height of our campaign and then tries to lecture Americans, one, about our culture and our ability to protest. When his own population, his own constituency are protesting him back home, to tell us that individuals in America who are protesting his policies are useful idiots of Iran, that's unacceptable for someone to come in my home and talk about other Americans. I'm so grateful I did not go because, you know, the Caribbean woman in me would have come out at that point.
That
I don't know if I would have
that's
been able to sit there like
right.
that.
And yeah, and Rashida Tlaib did her best there to just hold up a sign and not say anything.
She was being,
Eh,
you know, she's always talking about, oh, you know, her mother, what her mother may tell her if she sees her really acting up. So she tries to hold it down a little bit. But God bless her. She's, you know, there are many of us that are there for her in many ways.
that no, and I appreciate that. And like her, I have family in the West Bank as well. My father's born in what was then Palestine, and then as time went on, it's still the
Well,
West Bank now.
Dean, you have to
But
come to the Virgin Islands. We have a very
sure,
large Palestinian community, Jordanian and Palestinian community. And then right next to it, living well together, we have the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere that is still operational. Primarily, they were Sephardic Jews who came
Mhm.
during the Inquisition. Um,
Wow.
and so hand in hand, they're working together. They're very much almost on the same page on this issue in the Virgin Islands. But come and probably best to
Sure.
come in February, right? When it's super cold wherever you are.
I'm in New York City, so yeah, I'm in Manhattan, but I'm a Jersey guy. But
I
I'm
won't
going to
hold
take you up
that
on the
against
offer.
you for being a bridge and tunnel guy, but
That's not. I live in Manhattan. Now, don't. We had a very good conversation here.
I grew up in
Don't ruin
Brooklyn,
it.
so you know.
I know all about, but no, but I was touting Vice President Harris's words that, and I'll play it for listeners after
Hmm.
we come back. She just came out from a meeting from Netanyahu, and it's very clear that of course the hostages should be released. They should never been taken, let alone
Right,
released.
right.
But then she talked about that. But then she talked about what the Palestinians have been through, and the images have been unlike anything I've seen. And I've lived my whole life watching the struggle and conflict, and never saw what we've seen now. And having Republicans honor that man is beyond words. It's not even debatable. Like, as Bernie Sanders and Gerald Nadler and others have pointed out, who are proudly Jewish, this man's committed war crimes, and to honor him in the chamber of Congress is beyond the pale. But last thing, since I've never had a representative on from Virgin Islands, because I always ask elected officials when people back in the district raise issues, it's not just the Beltway stuff. What are people saying in the Virgin Islands? Are they different? Is it the same as the mainland? Are they unique? Like
Sure.
what's going on there?
Well, we're uniquely American in the
Right.
Caribbean. From our earliest days, we were owned by Denmark until 1917. We've had 7 flags that have flown over the islands, from the Knights of Malta to France, Denmark, Britain, you name it. They've tried to own us. But we have been very much a part of the American experience from the beginning. Alexander Hamilton grew up on the island of St. Croix.
Yeah.
We were part of that experiment as well, the American Revolution. And, Virgin Islanders are very resilient, very strong. We're one of only 2 places in the Western Hemisphere who have experienced chattel slavery, who won that slavery through organized violent overthrow, us in Haiti.
Hmm.
Ours was 15 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. And so we really revere that as a group of people who are willing to rally together and do what's necessary to advance. The issues right now we deal with is, of course, the fact that we are not treated equitably because we are, in fact, a territory. I
Hmm.
vote in committee, vote on amendments when we're in committee of the whole, but do not have a vote in final passage. And so for us, our voices have to be louder. We have to be stronger to receive the same amount of support. We are also really affected by climate change. With our hurricanes, the disasters that happen in Puerto Rico have happened in the Virgin Islands. And so we have been incredibly excited about President Biden, not only in his ability to help us rebuild after those storms, and there's massive projects that are going on now in terms of rebuilding our infrastructure, our schools, but also the ability to have industry and support through the Inflation Reduction Act. We have one of the deepest ports in the Caribbean. We have an American flag. And so we're trying to bring investors and investment to our islands to grow our economy. Because the greatest thing, of course, that we export is our young people and our minds. So how do we reverse
Wow.
our brain drain to keep people there in the islands? That's something that us as elected leaders and others in the islands are constantly thinking about. We're incredibly excited, of course, about Kamala Harris. Half, everybody talks about her Indian heritage, but the other half is, of course, in the Caribbean
Hmm.
with her father from Jamaica. And so she belongs to us in many ways, we believe. And so we are 100% in. We do not vote for president in the same way Puerto Rico and other islands don't. And so we are already organizing ourselves to have phone banking, as well as those who can, to go out and be in battleground states in these last couple of months to ensure that we can bring her across the line.
That's great. And last question, I've been to Puerto Rico many times. I've been to St. Thomas once, which is part of
Okay.
Virgin Islands. Now in Puerto Rico, there's always a discussion about statehood, and we hear it here as well, DC.
Yeah.
Is there a discussion of that in the Virgin Islands?
In the Virgin Islands, we're having a discussion about just self-determination. Just who do we want to be? What do we want to be? We're much smaller than Puerto Rico is. And I think those discussions are still nascent in
Okay.
the Virgin Islands, but they are occurring. You know, what does should our constitution look like? Should we be independent? Should we be a commonwealth? Right now, we're an unincorporated territory, and that doesn't feel right to anyone. How do we move and evolve to what we want to be is the discussions that we're having very vigorously. You know, we love to have political discussions in the Virgin Islands. Pollsters tell me that, you know, in other places in the United States, you may talk to someone for 5 minutes. A Virgin Islander is going to keep you on for 12. They are up on it. That is our sport, is politics. So, yeah.
It's like the Arab American community. We love talking politics all day. Be a lot of coffee involved and hookah, and they'll talk for hours and hours, and it's always fun. Well, Representative Plaskett, it was great to meet you. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for
It was
having
good
me.
talking. And covering so many topics in this time, and look forward to chat with you in the future in the Virgin Islands in February. No,
Yes.
before that, but I'd love to go down the Virgin Islands again. We're all listeners. We're going to have a big Dean Obeidallah show featuring Representative Plaskett in the Virgin Islands,
Real
February.
close,
We'll all
yeah.
be there. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Take care.
Take